What up and welcome. League update number 5, January 24th. All-star voting, first round of it has come in. We're getting to that in the Golden Era podcast, which is coming up next. But it's also trade season, and we've got another breaking news trade, and that's where we're going to start. Desmond Cooper on the move from Atlanta to Miami for Deontay Wilkins, Sterling Knowles, Benjamin Porter, and the Bulls' 2034 first-round pick. Wilkins and Porter were the 5th and 6th picks in the 31 and 32 draft. Porter's been a little bit better. Wilkins has been almost unplayable for Miami, so a bit of a miss there. But the Hawks, they signed Desmond Cooper to a 3-year deal this past offseason. Now they're moving on from him essentially immediately. Why make this move if you're the Miami Heat? Well, you're in desperate need of trying to win right now, right? Ja Morant is 34. He's not getting any younger, and shortly after this deal, he actually suffers a shoulder injury that's going to sideline him for 1 to 2 months. So it turns out to be a great one in terms of adding another star scorer. But if you're Miami, Desmond Cooper still has a lot on the table. At 31, yes, he's got some spinal injury history behind him, but he's still a 40% shooter from deep, 44.6% this season. He's been a really great piece in Atlanta. For the Hawks, though, this is a move that they thought they wanted to be relevant. They decide against it. In exchange, they're going to get themselves a first-round pick in the coming draft that the Heat got via the draft night trade, or pre-draft trade, if you will, that sends Kevonte Kennard to Chicago, and Damian Pack ends up being the 5th overall pick by the Heat. But for Miami, why not go all in? And there's a great write-up that's over on Operation Sports through The Ringer. That's linked in the bio or in the description below. Feel free to check it out. But really, this is an opportunity for Miami. You've got 3 guys that might not necessarily be considered bona fide superstars, but heck, now you're right in a spot to go out, try to win some basketball games. Desmond Cooper can still light it up, and now with Ja Morant out for a couple months because of a hyperextended shoulder, you're going to need him. All right, up next are our standings. We're starting in the Western Conference where the Golden State Warriors are 34-11. We'll talk a little bit more about them. They are sitting atop the Western Conference. Phoenix Suns have been up and down, but they currently sit half game behind the Minnesota Timberwolves for the 7th spot. The Kings, again, have been surging, as have the Jazz, a very muddied 2-5 picture there. And then in the Eastern Conference, not getting much clearer, 33-win Pacers, 33-win Nets, who we're also going to talk about, 30-win Milwaukee, and then Boston sitting there, 29 wins as your top 4. All right, head over to our league leaders, where Jalen Justice remains on top, but a huge run from Amari Swift, 34.6 points, has him in second. A tight race for the number 1 scoring leader spot between Justice, Swift, and Alston, and it still is Rashawn Matthews. He's missed a couple games recently for Brooklyn, but he still sits with the number 1 spot in rebounding. Head on over to the assists. Javon Stokes still on top. He is 9.9, just a shade off of 10 assists per game, as the guard for the Bulls is carrying them this season, though Cuxix and Robinson sitting right behind him. And then with steals, Savion White has remained on top, 2 steals per game. Andrew Watkins for Miami, Darius Dixon. There's a lot of guys at that 1.6 steals mark that can come and go on any given day, but Savion White sits above them all for the league lead in the steals. And then lastly, familiar name, Cameron Sullivan. He's actually dropped 0.4 blocks per game, but he still leads Rashawn Matthews by nearly 1 block a game. That's why, if you're looking at Miami, why did you go after Desmond Cooper? Desmond Cooper is not a great defender. Ja Morant's not a great defender. Cameron Sullivan is. He is locking down the inside. So if you get through that first line of defense, Sullivan's there to clean up the mess. All right, let's head to some news items around the league. The Golden State Warriors, big question mark for them was, were they going to be able to withstand any types of injuries? And so far, they have. Over the last couple games, they've been without Javon Roll for a handful, Deontay Dixon for a handful, Russell Kingston missed some games, and despite going 3-3 in their last 6 games, they've still been a really good basketball team, and in fact, they're actually starting to find a little bit of depth. Jermaine Trimble's had a good little run since the beginning of the month. He's kind of always been their stretch 4, stretch 5. He's continued to do that in good minutes. Aaron Triano, a really great vertical threat. He's been doing a lot of the same in terms of when he gets those opportunities. Thomas Fleming, who they called up on a two-way contract, flashing some three-point opportunity. Branko Todorovic as well, 20 points in that game against Denver. Great facilitator against Orlando, 8 assists per game. They've really entrusted him to be the backup point guard for this group, and he's answered that one with flying colors. So for Golden State right now, they found some depth. They're seeming to put some things together, and they still sit atop the Western Conference. Head to the Eastern Conference. Washington Wizards, the last team to make the NBA Finals before the back-to-back NBA Finals from Orlando. They've actually been playing really good as of late. They've won 6 of 7. They're sitting now at 20-25, right there in the 10 spot. They're leading Atlanta. They're leading Cleveland, two teams that were kind of expected to battle for the 10 seed. It's now Washington's to take advantage of. You look at their last couple games, they've been playing really well. Big part of that has been Cole Anthony has really erupted onto the scene. He's played much more aggressive. He's been much more assertive. He's taken more shots in the month of January than he was in the month of December. He's not afraid to be their number one guy, and that's something that they definitely need with the loss of Zane Bennett. So Cole Anthony, 27 points per game in January, up from 20 in December. Yeah, his field goal percentage is down a little bit, but you see that big leap in his field goal attempts over the last month compared to the 3 months, really 2 months and change prior. So Washington, they're in the race for it. They're the one team that at the trade deadline you thought, could they sell it off? Unlikely, because they've got the pieces. They've been the second winningest team over the last 5 seasons behind only Golden State. Seemed like only a matter of time before they make a push. Now they have. And then 2 big injuries in Brooklyn and in Boston, and it comes at pretty much the worst possible time for both. Let's start Brooklyn. Brooklyn had been absolutely rolling. They had won 14 of 15 games since that 2-game losing streak to the Golden State Warriors. Their one loss was a 3-point defeat to Dallas on December 27th. However, in their loss on January 21st to the Los Angeles Lakers, they lose their all-NBA point guard, Brighton Reed. He's going to be out now with what's being termed a knee tendonitis. So he's out 6 to 8 weeks. That's the same injury that sidelined Louis Morgan at the beginning of the season. But you look at Brighton Reed's stats this season, he has been nothing short of phenomenal, particularly over the last couple months. 34 points per game in November, 29 and 28 in the months of December and January. He's been extremely efficient in January on 17 shots per game, 60% field goal percentage. Then the second big injury, it's Amari Swift. Swift had been an easy MVP favorite entering the month of January. He'd been playing absolutely incredible in January and in December. 38 points per game in January, 36.9 points per game in December. Boston was tearing up the Eastern Conference, moving up those standings, but instead, now they're going to have to be without him because of a broken ankle that he suffered in their loss to Golden State in the first quarter. He had 9 points already. They're going to be without him. It's going to be tough now to stay in a very competitive Eastern Conference with Orlando trying to surge back into it, with the Heat trying to survive some of their injuries. The Bucks have been playing well. The only saving grace here for Boston and Brooklyn is that behind them, there's just not a lot of consistency. Toronto hasn't been playing well because of all the injuries and the suspensions. The Chicago Bulls have been young. Miami now has injuries. Orlando looks fatigued. But it's no good time to lose a star player, and both are going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks. And then a litany of injuries. We've talked about Amari Swift. We've talked about Rashawn Matthews. John Morant, of course, as we talked out at the top. Jonathan Malheur should be coming back soon. Hornets really need him. They've been struggling as of late. Cade Cunningham dealing with a lower back bruise. Terrence Clark now with a sprained right finger. He's been playing through that. Joshua Chapman, not a huge name, but for Denver could be a piece that potentially is on the move, though a right hand fracture going to disrupt any of that. We're waiting on the potential return of Zane Bennett, however, could be on the horizon for Washington just when they need it. He's expected to come back in 1 to 2 weeks. He has been out since the 17th of November with that torn MCL that he suffered against Orlando. Sidney Cross, of course, we've talked about him being out. Parker Pollard dealing with some right shoulder tendonitis. So the injuries piling up across the NBA. They're impacting the playoff race. They're going to impact some All-Stars. We'll talk about All-Stars next on the podcast. Some big broadcast games coming up, though. Our first broadcast game is going to be February 3rd, Oklahoma City at Indiana. Tobias Bell making his return to the Pacers, the organization that drafted him all those years ago. They played once already on December 20th. It was a 98-92 Oklahoma City win. Tobias Bell had 22 in that one. CJ McCoy had 31. We're going to get that return game on February 3rd. And then Golden State on February 9th. We're hoping to see Tyrese Alston live and in person. That's going to be Warriors-Kings in Sacramento. Big matchup of two teams that could be on a collision course for the Western Conference Finals. Thank you as always for tuning in. Make sure you're like, comment, subscribe, turn on the notifications. Got to do that. Big request. Appreciate everyone that does. If you have any questions, thoughts, opinions, drop them in the comments. Look forward to responding. Of course, tune in over on Operation Sports. All of the written content that's available, kind of give a little bit more depth to the world that's going on here. So thanks again for tuning in. Up next is the Golden Era Podcast, and we're diving into All-Star voting as of January 23rd.